Welcome to the Latino Slant. Please like and comment, but subscribe to the channel. Enjoy the video.
Come on, y'all. Come on, y'all. Come on, y'all. The Slant.
Yeah, but isn't this the unplugged version? I don't know. I think it's the unplugged version.
All right, Paulie, let's go.
All right, listen, y'all. Just go ahead and let the guest play. Come on, jeez. That's better. Where'd I go?
Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome to the Latino Slant. My name is Paulie. I'm joined by Tom from Midnight's Edge.
Hola.
Hola. And I saw this incredible New York Times article on La Bamba, and I thought of you, man.
La 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 Bamba.
Well, we got to do this together. You know, I mean, it's legend now, and it's like you know that whole thing of Taylor saying it's still the #1 Latino film and it shouldn't be.
I mean, yeah, there could be some technical arguments for it, but yeah, you're right. It is kind of alarming in a lot of ways. This many years later, though, La Bamba still has outgrossed any major Latino film. Let's be real.
Let's be real.
And it's just it's sad. It's alarming. It's something that I brought up a few times that I can't believe, and I was glad that Taylor Hackford brought it up as well. And hopefully, it's something we can bring a little bit more attention to.
Well, I think it's you know, and I just think it's amazing that the New York Times is covering it. And not that I'm a fan of the New York Times as I used to be, but that anything of the Chicano culture, like, it seems to be coming back. It seems to be a lot of emphasis, and hopefully that'll spell into more really good Chicano films.
Well, in this culture we live in right now, where everything is, you know, highlighting anything not white, exactly, race. It is kind of strange that the Latino culture has been overlooked, seemingly. And recently I saw, you know, statistics about how the audience breakdown is in America, and to no one's surprise, at least in our circle, the Latino audience is the second largest audience.
Right.
So why are they being ignored so much? I just don't understand, especially when they're trying to push for this, you know, diversity first stuff.
I mean, from Ben Bratt to Jesse Borrego, all the people that we've have interviewed, they're clamoring the same thing, and that maybe Hollywood is taking us for granted that we won't complain. I don't know, man. You know, but this New York Times article, I feel, comes out just in time. La Bamba and the lives it changed. The actor Lou Diamond Phillips and the writer-director Luis Valdez look back more than 3 decades at how the biopic did and didn't make waves in Hollywood. And there's, of course, to the left, Lou Diamond Phillips. And for people who aren't familiar with who Luis Valdez is, that's who he is. He also did Zoot Suit.
Yeah.
This is by Yolanda Machado, and at press time, it is Cinco de Mayo that it came out. When La Bamba premiered in the summer of 1987, the expectations for its success were low. The film was based on the life of Ritchie Valens, a Mexican-American teenager, birth name Richard Steven Valenzuela, who was one of the first Latinos in rock and roll. It covered his beginnings as a farm worker in Delano, California, his bond with his contentious big brother Bob, and the complexities of having to hide his background to make it in the music business with hits like the title tune. I think that's a little bit of a modern take.
Somewhat, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a modern take. I don't think he
really hid his Latino background so much outside of just changing his name.
And I don't think he had any trauma with it at all either.
No, especially when your biggest hit is literally La Bamba. I mean,
Right. Yeah. I mean, he dealt with it pretty well. I mean, it wasn't that
complex. He rolled with it.
And that's just like the problem with some of these modern journalists is that like stop using modernize. You know, it was a different time back then, and a lot, whether they're Mexican American or Irish American or I don't know, African American, they all found ways to succeed.
And to be honest, I think that scene in the film is probably pretty accurate, considering Bob, I think, has reiterated that story a couple times.
Right.
And Bob was the one that had the issue.
Bob was. You can't change our name. You can't just cut it in half.
And then Ritchie points out, like, yeah, Steve was so gung-ho American, he wouldn't care. He would just be like so proud that, you know, I had accomplished this. So I think, Ritchie always had it in perspective. And that was the thing that if you listen to anybody talk about Ritchie, was like he was always described as somebody who was definitely like a wise soul. I mean, way beyond his years. I mean, even though he was a 16, 17-year-old kid, he could definitely, you know, I mean, the kid obviously knew what he was doing. He was way ahead of his time. I mean,
that's a great point. Those are great points.
Especially when rock and roll was still in its infancy.
All right. At its core, it was the story of two brothers working hard, working to achieve the American dream, a dream that was usually reserved for white Americans. All right, come on, calm down. Okay.
Considering that rock and roll was still probably considered quote unquote black music at that time, that's kind of funny.
Well, I mean, the dream was usually reserved for white Americans at that time. Here's the thing. Again, you know, we can come up with a dozen examples.
You had Elvis and Buddy Holly.
Well, or the rest whether it was music, whether there's music or film or in the workplace, people broke those barriers. It was being done, you know. But anyways, that's I think we have to settle for the fact that the writer has modern lenses on. Valens died in 1959, just a year after being signed to Delphi Records in a plane crash that also killed two other stars, Buddy Holly and J.P. Richardson, better known as the Big Bopper. The short-lived career of a Latino teenager didn't exactly bring Hollywood executives running. What were dubbed ethnic stories were considered box office draws. In an early article in the Los Angeles Times paraphrasing marketing specialists who privately fear that La Bamba, written and directed by a Latino playwright, Luis Valdez, and starring an unknown actor of Filipino descent, Lou Diamond Phillips, would fall fatally short of expectations, would sour Hollywood on other films about Latinos. Got anything there, Tom?
Boy, were they wrong.
Yeah. And there's Lou and his outfit. Yet the biopic made for just $6.5 million went on to gross more than $54 million. Adjusted for inflation, that's more than $120 million. I mean, that is a sleeper hit, right? That's what they would call it. Like, you know, it's a huge hit.
I mean, normally you would kind of consider it a sleeper the way it played, but that kind of box office for that kind of a movie in '87 is unheard of. Unheard of.
Yeah. La Bamba became the flagship of what many thought was going to be a Latino wave in Hollywood. Phillips said by video chat. This is Lou Diamond saying this, but it never took hold enough to where it became a mainstay. I would love to see this video interview, but it never took hold enough to where it became a mainstay. Valdez added, in that sense, then La Bamba is unique and fresh because not very much has been around to compete with it. With La Bamba playing on HBO Max now and making a brief return to the theaters, Valdez reunited with Phillips to discuss the film, its impact 34 years later. These are edited excerpts from our conversation. Okay.
I didn't know it was on HBO Max. That's cool.
That's cool. That is new.
Considering I paid a lot for my Blu-ray.
Well, also too, American Me is now on Netflix and I think charted like number 3 or 4. La Bamba is considered one of the must-see Latino stories in cinematic history. How does it feel that a film you created over 3 decades ago is still so influential? Valdez, it feels good, both good and bad in a way. It's good that the movie is relevant and that it's up to date and that people can enjoy it because of what it is. At the same time, there should be dozens of movies like La Bamba representing the Latino experience. not just the Latino experience, but the minority experience as a whole in America. Because I think what makes the movie strong is that it references a new consensus in America, what it means to be American. It most definitely has multicultural roots, but it subscribes to the same basic universal concern in every person's life: the family, work, hope, ambition, dreams, desires, and it's relevant in the sense because those things never go away. Those are human and eternal. I mean, you've talked about that. You've said that, on why this movie is so successful, why you bring it out today, it could still be a hit.
Oh yeah, it was well done. I mean, honestly, I think he's kind of interjecting more of the woke elements into it that were really there. I mean, it's just more of a story of family more so than it is the Latino part first.
Well, he says the Latino part first, maybe because of his bitterness that stuff hasn't been made, but then he goes back. Yeah, but then he goes back to the universal elements. And exactly. He's always said that. He's always said I remember an old quote of Luis's, I write for the universe. I remember him saying that. So, I hear you, Tom.
Well, this movie, like, the thing is it didn't just resonate with Latino Americans, right? Mm-hmm. It resonated with teenagers because it had a great soundtrack.
Music lovers
because also the soundtrack. And then you had, the girls were just, oh my God, like Lou Diamond Phillips was the new pinup guy from the teen magazines. It just hit a cultural zeitgeist. Like, you got to remember, this also came out the same year as Dirty Dancing.
Yeah.
Which is a similar era. This was a time, for some reason, in America where they were just very nostalgic for the late 50s, early 60s. Basically what you would call the pre-Beatles era.
Right.
And it just, for some reason, it just hit just right. And I think that has a lot less to do with the cultural factor of it than it does more with the pop cultural factor. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah. I would say, as a Chicano, to see those elements, though, being told through that lens was very special.
And what's great about it is it's not stereotypical. I think that's the main issue, and that's probably why it doesn't feel like it's such a cultural film first than it does a pop cultural film first, is because it's not throwing it in your face. Like, really, there's only a couple of scenes where, like the one that we mentioned, and maybe 2 or 3 others that really kind of hit on the whole, like, Latino thing like right head on, like
the adversaries, right.
Yeah.
Right. And that shit just happened. That was the mark of the era.
Yeah. It wasn't like everything in Ritchie's life. It was just a part of who he was. And that's how I loved how the movie handled it. Because you're right. Like, if they made this movie now, it would be all about the fact that he's Latino.
Well, it would be all about the struggles.
Exactly.
Right. And the thing is that La Bamba, this was a very, this was a very real happy family. I mean, more about Bob and his life after the fact, and they kind of painted a gentler, kinder Bob in the movie. But we've all had those crazy drunk uncles that always, are always causing trouble with the family. But the love and the bond, I mean, they're really happy people, man. And Ritchie was like you said, he was very well brought up to where, he dealt with everything pretty well.
And as bad as Bob is, you can understand him. He's the more relatable character because you see the world through Bob's eyes, in a sense, like, because most of us aren't like Ritchie. Most of us, aren't, know, I mean, let's be real. Ritchie was every mother's dream. He was a great student. He was a great musician. He was a perfect brother. He was there for his younger siblings, and you go back and listen to interviews about him. There isn't really a bad thing ever fucking said about the guy. I don't remember, and I've dug some deep, and it's tough to find anything because the kid was only 17. So first of all, that's
right.
So
what you could go off was that he was a musical genius.
Yeah, exactly. He was like a phenom or whatever you want to call it at that time. I mean, the kid just picked up a guitar and it just was like, bam. You know, it was like he took to it like a fish to water. So I mean, that's the real story here. It has, again, I don't want to downplay the whole, you know, Latino struggle of his story, but that is a big part of it.
Well,
and
this
especially
is why,
when it comes to the family.
We're together on this, because I'm coming from one perspective, you're coming in from another. And with films like this and with great films, that's how it should be, right?
But I think
you know, everyone can get something out of it.
That it's not a stereotype, because I can understand
that's a good point.
Where Luis is coming from here. Because let's be real, even though we like movies and love movies like Blood In, Blood Out, Stand and Deliver,
or even Tax Collector of last year,
or some other ones, there's a lot of times where a lot of those things have a lot of they hang heavy on the stereotypes
and on violence and
exactly
drugs. Absolutely. Lou Diamond Phillips says, I agree with what Luis said. What we would like to have been further along at this point in time. We would have seen, I think, for the last 20 years as a very vocal. We have seen, I think, for the last 20 years as a very vocal African American community, and very motivated and determined producers, directors, and writers. When you have Tyler Perry, Ava DuVernay, or Shonda Rhimes, you see these creators who become touchstones to opening up your own shop. Luis was the pioneer in that. He just didn't get enough people to follow up in his footsteps. This is very interesting.
That's very true.
That Lou Diamond is saying this, because Lou Diamond is not a Latino. He, you know, and he's had a, if I can say this, a colorful career.
Yeah, but he's generally played more Latino parts than he has anything else.
Yeah, but which would nowadays, like, you know, because everyone is so woke, you know, over woke, could he get away with those Latino roles? And we've talked about this too.
Yeah, we've had this conversation. No, I don't think he could.
Honestly. Right. I think it's interesting that, you know, what he talked about and the people that he brought up, you know, because these African American producers, directors, and writers, they're all very different from each other, which is very important. Tyler Perry is kind of more of like your Rodriguez model. Doing it outside on my own, creating my own studio. Ava DuVernay is very much part of modern Hollywood. Shonda does all those, you know, she created Scandal and all that stuff, and works with mainstream people. What was interesting about Ava is, and this is, I got this from director Kenneth Castillo, is that she went out of her way for, I forgot, one season of some recent show where not only did she hire all women producers, but Latinas, which no one else has done. You know, and that's what Lou's speaking to, is that he's basically saying the African American community, they were unified and got some shit done by being together and getting, you know, and that's always been the problem with Latino.
Yeah, and as noble as I see that, I mean, I could see that becoming a very skewed voice at the same time if you have just one voice in the writer's room, basically. But no, I get where he's coming from, and it's a very valid point, and that's kind of going off of what we were saying earlier is, yeah, we're seeing a lot of attention thrusted upon a lot of these other cultures and races, but not the Latino culture, which is very underserved. Latinos have been able to thrive. I mean, look at the past 2 decades on television between comedy and a few other places. It really feels like that's sadly missing on the big screen. And I'm not saying like, you know,
as we're speaking right now, the number one show right now is the final season of Selena on Netflix,
right?
You know, and then there's Gentified, then there was Vita, then there's, you know,
but like Fluffy's got his own show. I mean, the comedians, a lot of the comedians have gotten their own shows. And,
absolutely.
I mean,
and you're right. They're a lot more diverse and not necessarily stereotypes, or kind of smartly writing about the stereotypes.
And that's the fine line that needs to be rode here. And I think, you know, as much as, you know, Lou's right, but that's where I was kind of going back to the same point, was like, you know, with Shonda's writer's room being all Latino women, that's great. But are you only getting one or
and then directors, not the writers?
Okay, sorry. Well, if it's all directors, that's a little different. But like if you're having if you're having just one voice like that in the writer's room, you're only going to appeal to a certain demographic then.
Right. Going on, Senor Valdez. No, it was great. Senor Valdez, you mentioned that the film was an American story. It inspired many first and second generation American Latino kids to dream big. Why is there such a barrier to putting an American label on what is considered an ethnic story? Why is there such a barrier to putting an American label? Okay, that's interesting. All right. Valdez, I think it is a question of the American narrative. What story are we telling here, and from whose point of view? We've been sold on the idea of the Pilgrims in 1492 and Europe coming so forthright. Well, that should include the story of Mexico, which is another country altogether as far as the American narrative is concerned. But actually, the whole thing has to be reviewed again. There's a need to rewrite the narrative, to look at the narrative again and say, okay, what is an American? What does it mean to be American? All right. We all live ordinary lives. We don't have to be gang members. We don't have to be criminals. We don't have to be drug addicts. We don't have to be violent. We can be normal people that go to the shopping centers and buy food and clothes for our kids. And
okay, he's kind of saying what we were just saying here a little bit.
Totally. He's
totally. Kind of going at it from a very woke angle, but yeah, he's definitely saying what we were saying is like, this movie did this already.
Yeah, and I'm wondering too, like, as far as for discussion purposes, what is woke and what is just really being progressive?
Yeah.
You know, because Luis has always been this. It's not something new, you know.
What I see here is, okay, let me rephrase this then. Yeah. What I see is two very smart individuals who are extremely aware of the world they live in right now.
Yeah.
And are wording everything very carefully to where it will resonate with a specific group of people.
Yeah. You might be right.
And now they were way ahead of the curve before. Yeah. Now, I'm sure we're going to get to a point here where Lou's probably going to apologize for playing a Latino part eventually, or you just wait.
I don't want to spoil anything in this article.
I know this is what's going to come. No, because
I think you're gonna be pleasantly.
I hope he doesn't.
I think you're gonna be pleasantly surprised in what Luis does say.
Okay, so just give it to me here. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut then.
Okay. We have the life
words of Bob. I should have just kept my mouth shut.
We have the life that is represented in all the movies that deal with white people. They get the whole range. Minorities don't. They get locked into a stereotype. So you're right there. As far as the woke angle, people are eating those words up as we speak. The more violent, the more exotic, and the stranger it is, supposedly the more commercial. Well, that's a lie. I'm sorry, Luis. He
was right 20 years ago.
Right.
Now he's right though, as far as what you were just saying before. You could not make La Bamba the same way now that you did then. The studios would not allow it. You would have to make it that exuberant Latino story that, it's all about that fact. All about that. It's everything around every corner has to do with the fact that he's Latino. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious about what happened to your filmmaking career after La Bamba. You directed and wrote a few TV movies, but then went back to theater and stopped making movies. What happened? Great question. That's my favorite question so far. Valdez, I became a filmmaker years after I was a union organizer and the founder of the El Teatro Campesino and a college professor. I went to a number of other things. I went back to teaching as well. As one of the founding members of Cal State University, Monterey Bay, I started this thing called the Institute of Teledramatic Arts and Technology, which anticipated some of the changes that are going on now with streaming and such. But frankly, there was a great deal of difficulty in trying to get new projects that I wanted to do. They offered me things that I didn't want to do, so I decided not to do because I had other options. So kind of taking the Jesse Borrego route, waiting for the roles or waiting for the right project as a director, which is why we didn't see him really do anything else after this big hit. In the late 90s, you said you were going to start working on a sequel to La Bamba that would follow Ritchie's brother Bob. What happened to that project? Valdez, it seemed to me that there was an extension of the story. I had followed Bob for the movie. God bless him. He died a couple of years ago. He was 81 with a mohawk and an earring. He was just a sensational person to know and to enjoy really as a friend. There was a story there that had to do with the extension of of the history of rock and roll, how we went from the 50s into the 60s. The vehicle to get there was really Bob's through line. So I pitched this idea to a number of producers and I couldn't get a hook. I'm surprised. That sounds amazing.
At the time he did La Bamba, I'm not surprised, but that's about what being ahead of a curve's all about.
Yeah.
I mean, if you couldn't have anticipated, I mean, I know they're kind of synonymous because of when they came out and the soundtracks and certain aspects of it. Like I said, you could not have predicted La Bamba and Dirty Dancing happening the way they did at that time period. You just couldn't. In any other year, if they would have probably came out, they'd have gotten buried. Nobody would have remembered them. They'd have been. I mean, even look at the Buddy Holly story in comparison to La Bamba. It did well and it got a lot of praise and notice. But the box office, I mean, come on, La Bamba made, I think, 3 times the amount the Buddy Holly story did.
Yeah.
And just in general, you would think, wait a minute here, because Buddy Holly, I mean, it has nothing to do with a black, white, or Latino thing. It has to do with the fact that just, pound for pound, Buddy Holly has, infinitely more to do with rock and roll history than Ritchie Valens ever did.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that his movie is still more remembered now, and Ritchie is even more remembered now because of this movie, because before this, he was just that other guy that died along with Buddy Holly and the Big Bopper. You know what I mean? The kid who did La Bamba. Oh, okay, yeah, that guy. And the same thing with Big Bopper. Let's be real. He's a one-hit wonder. I mean, even less so than Rich. At least Ritchie had a couple of hits.
Sure. Ritchie was just starting out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Big Bopper was more of a gimmick.
Exactly.
But I think what you said too about the timing in 1987 when this came out,
it was just prime for it. I don't know why.
Yeah, and when Buddy Holly came out, it was like late 70s, so it was more of a art movie.
Yes,
and it got him an Academy Award nomination, which La Bamba got no nomination.
That's what bothers the piss out of me, and I think a lot of that has to do with its commercial success.
I think, quite frankly, we don't have enough producers that understand the minority experience in America. They're always going to do the same thing: the violence, the drugs, the sensationalism, thinking that's what's going to sell. More often than not, it's the quiet human story that finally connects with people, which I think is the secret to La Bamba. I mean, I think as far as like a storytelling connection, but people are always going to see things blow up, and they're superheroes. Did the story change you? Did it inspire you to do something that you might not have done before? Phillips, it underlined and galvanized my own dream. I was ready for Bob for a few days, and then one day Luis walked past me. I was sitting in the hall. He goes, "Tomorrow you read for Ritchie." I remember walking down Pico Boulevard thinking, man, oh God, I've been wrapping my head around Bob, and now I got to play Ritchie? The epiphany that came to me was, I'm already Ritchie. I'm a kid with a big dream, the desire to go for it. The whole process of becoming Ritchie and having that catapult me the way it did, it changed my life. I had a philosophy. It's going to change my life, but it's not going to change me. The experience made me introspective for the rest of my career, not feeling like I was entitled to this, that I was fortunate and never, ever ever be less than grateful. Got anything to add there, Tom?
No, I'm just listening along, and yeah, I mean, I kind of already knew that part of the story, but yeah, that's
yeah. He didn't apologize.
No, that's good. I'm glad.
Valdez, Ritchie and I were part of the same generation. I was in high school when rock and roll hit back in the 50s. I can understand Ritchie's ambition because I had the same ambitions. We were all gung-ho Americans back then, and I dreamt that all the opportunities were available to me. If I wanted to do whatever, if I wanted to be a rock star, I could. And Ritchie had that dream, and he acted on it. And the same thing happened to me in the theater. I mean, there was no Latino theater when I started, and I realized no one else has done it, so I'll do it. I began to write the plays in the 60s. It was a whole different world then. That is why I identified with Ritchie. He died for it, but he lived his dreams.
Yeah.
There you go.
And I just looked up, not one nomination that year for La Bamba.
Yeah. I mean, and then there's an Essential American Latino Essential 20 Films since 2000. and then reading the comments on the side. Just right there, would a Filipino American portray a Mexican actor in a movie today? Somehow I doubt it.
Right.
That's hilarious. I didn't even see these right here.
Well, I mean, at least in Young Guns, they played up more of his Native American side.
Right. But yeah.
But I think he was also playing Mexican Native American there as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that was a really weird role. Chavez, Indian Mexican, you asshole. I remember that line. I'm like, okay, am I supposed to like you, or I don't understand what's going on?
Yeah, he was always one of my favorites in the movie.
Yeah,
especially that other guy would give him shit.
So, what do you think of this story?
I'm glad to see it. Honestly, I think it's bringing the movie a little bit more attention. Maybe it's priming things for what we've been talking about, because, like you said, the Selena route would be a really great route for a Ritchie story, as long as they don't hang it too much on just the Latino experience and more so just the American experience. I think, like they did with the original film, like really take a lot of notes and pay homage to that film, because you're going to have a tough time finding a duo who can capture what Lou Diamond did with Isai Morales. It's just that is, and again, there's one that I can't believe. Not so much Lou, but Isai not getting nominated for Best Supporting Actor for me is just, how can that be? I mean, that has got to be one of the all-time, not just forget the Latino part, one of the all-time greatest performances, period.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy goes from every extreme in that movie, and it's believable, and you still love the guy by the end, even though you know he's an asshole, and he does almost every bad thing you can do. He does exactly what you have to understand, and that is, you have to be able to understand why this family stood by this guy. Why he is so beloved, and why he's such a big part of Ritchie's life.
So if they're priming it for some sort of revised limited series, and we've talked about this, I mean, who the family would have to be heavily involved, like Selena's family is. Like,
unfortunately, there's not many left, but that's the sad part. Thing. We brought up before too. So hopefully somebody has documented a lot of stuff. Because the sisters and stuff were way too young to remember a lot of it. So I think a lot of what they're remembering is just
what's handed down. It's handed down. So in a way, they could be, to me, they would be better guardians of his legacy than woke Hollywood hands.
Exactly. And as far as otherwise, though, I just hope somebody talked to Bob and his mom.
Well, Bob lived for a long time, so there's a lot to draw.
And the other Bob too, is he still alive? Bob Keane. He's another one.
No, I think he
passed as well, because
recently.
I don't know about recently, but I know. I think he's also gone.
Wow.
Because I've seen interviews with him.
And again, I love that. It was done for Cinco de Mayo, whatever, but we'll take it, and we'll.
Not Bob Keane. What the fuck is his name? His producer.
Bob Keane. Yeah.
Is it Bob Keane? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and he changed it to Bob Keane.
Yeah. Okay.
I love the conversation. There was really nothing that bothered me too much about it. There was like you said, a little bit of the woke lens, but
no, they're saying a lot of what we've been saying.
Which is why I knew you would like this article.
And it's true though. I mean, I don't understand this in this world we live in right now, where Hollywood is trying to be so wokoso. Why
everyone wants those shirts now?
Yeah, where's the Latino experience? I mean, and there's tons of stories, not just Selena, not just Ritchie.
No, absolutely.
And I mean, there's also how do you say his Escalante or whatever, the guy from Stand and Deliver, the teacher.
Jaime Escalante, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's his story again that can be revisited. But there's other people. I mean, those are probably the ones that we remember the most, just because of those films.
Well, where are those films now?
Exactly. Right? I mean, Stand and Deliver is not even available on Blu-ray, because I checked the other night.
Wow.
or last night or whatever. It's not. You can get it in digital. You can down, whatever, Voodoo and whatnot, but you can't get it. It's on DVD, but it's never been released on Blu-ray. American Me is on Blu-ray. But as we found, Blood In, Blood Out, I said it was out of print. I should preface that with, you can get it on DVD, but it's one of the world's shittiest fucking DVDs you'll ever find. It needs to be revisited. Let's put it that way. And there's a lot of other Latino films from that era that need to be revisited. But like I said earlier, one thing that those all have in common that they don't have in common with in La Bamba, outside of Bob's character, is a lot of the same stereotypes. And those are the type of stereotypes that Luis brought up in this interview.
Yeah,
that seem to for some reason people will point out when it comes to African American films or things of that sort, but for some reason they don't seem to bring it up as a problem in Latino culture at all.
Well, the latest one I can think of was The Tax Collector.
Which I haven't seen yet, but what's that one about?
In where Latino journalists criticized it. When it's like, well, it's an action drug film. That's what it is. And no, I saw it twice. I had a good time. It kicks ass. I had a Chicano lead.
Is it something more like Machete though, or is it more?
No, it's actually more like a I would say
straightforward action
in the vein of Scarface and Carlito's Way.
All right.
Yeah.
Which, there's another problem we could get into.
Well, no, there's a lot. I think we're going to do Scarface at another time. But with Tax Collector, the lead was Chicano. A lot of the characters were played by Chicano actors, and it was a success. That's what I wanted to say. It was a huge success for a quarantine movie.
Well, that's good. Even if it does play with some of the prototypical stereotypes or whatever, I don't care. I don't have so much of a problem with that as long as it's a good movie and you can still have fun with stereotypes and play them out. There's a way of doing it, and that's where a lot of humor comes from.
Yeah.
It's real easy to kind of pull a lot of humor out of that kind of stuff. And, there's a way of subverting expectations. Are you listening, Rianne?
Oh my God. Well, the thing is that I used to be so, hyper aware of Latino stereotypes in film that it bothered me. Right. I think at a time I didn't like Blood In, Blood Out for a time, but that was back then because there were no opportunities for, like we went really dry in those 90s. Well, one, stereotypes exist, in everyone's culture. And two, people like to see them. They enjoy, like I said, whether it's, shoot 'em up, drug crime films from the Godfather to Blood In, Blood Out. They're a success. They're still talked about.
Well, here's one thing we brought up earlier is we brought up La Bamba only really has maybe 2 or 3 scenes where they really deal with, the Latino part head on, which is one we brought up, which is where he's changed his name. But there is one other scene that I can't really find any documentation on it being real. And that is the big conflict between Donna and her father, because Donna is actually not a real person. Right. She's an amalgamation of a few girls. Ritchie was actually pretty popular with the ladies. So I've had a hard time finding any correlation between Ritchie being ostracized by any parents. So that may be something that could be re-explored there. Yeah, I mean, maybe, they did that at the time, and they made it kind of a stereotypical story where I'm not so sure that was an actual problem.
Yeah, you got to create drama somewhere, right? Well, let's create for Ritchie, because Ritchie's story was so he really had no conflict.
I mean, there was a Donna, but
they had broken up.
Yeah, the whole Donna in the story is kind of not a real person.
Right. Let's not just one person. He was a lady. He was
a bit of a ladies' man.
Yeah. Right. But it makes sense that for Luis to, all right, well, let me give him a little bit of strife.
Well, not just that. it's easier to make that character a person, and with the Donna song, it just all plays with that dramatic.
Yeah.
I get it.
And it was nice and romantic. We was playing it in the telephone booth.
And you get the little conflict with the parents and everything like that. But
it worked. But it wasn't like over the top.
No, it wasn't too bad. But again,
now,
that's something you could re-explore. Like I don't necessarily think that he had that kind of resistance that he did in the film.
The thing too is, man, we have a thing, and this is a real thing in Latino families is, the lighter you are, it's like, what are you? And it's always pointed out the darker relatives. It was just a weird thing. And Ritchie Valens, the real Ritchie Valens, was pretty light skinned.
I don't know if that was so much of a problem, but just his demeanor and the way he probably carried himself as well.
Well, I just think he was, I think if he looked like Isai Morales in the 50s, I think it would have been a lot tougher to sell him.
Well, I think that's a part of the problem too, is he just didn't act like a tough guy.
Right. He was, and he was a sweet, jovial guy.
Exactly my point. Yes. Yeah. Like the way he carried himself, the way he
was cute enough.
Exactly. Right. He was non-threatening. I hate to use that term, but I'm sure that he came across that way among most parents. And again, I don't think he really got that serious with any women. That was my other point.
His whole thing was being homesick and playing music.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and the whole phone call with Bob, all that shit happened. Like all the stuff between him and Bob is pretty accurate. All that kind of stuff. Because Bob's reiterated a lot of those stories a few times. And again, like you just take out the Donna aspect of the movie, the rest of the movie is pretty accurate.
Well, and the fact that Luis brought up the Bob potential sequel, I mean, that's pretty amazing.
It would have been nice to see something like that. That'd be kind of cool, especially if you can get Isai back to kind of. I don't know what you would do, but.
Well, I think that's something to explore in like a limited series, like 6 episodes. Where you go through the whole family.
It could be an interesting story, yeah.
Something we would never think of.
True.
Unthinkable of remaking a classic like La Bamba.
Well, not just so much remaking it, but making it more from Bob's point of view. That is an interesting aspect. Because, I mean, the movie is kind of a 50-50 thing for the most part. A little bit more Ritchie's story. But, I mean, I think Luis and the rest of them have always said that, it is a story about brothers more so than it is a Ritchie Valens biopic. So, at one point, I do feel like Ritchie does kind of deserve his own spotlight. But then again, it is hard to tell Ritchie's story without Bob. And that is an interesting side of things to kind of see is what happened after, everybody's always concentrated on Ritchie and what happened, and then the crash, but what happened after? I mean, what happened to Bob after? He's got a lot of things that happened to him in his life afterwards. And, like you said, the rest of the family and how it affected them. And, there was a period where I'm sure a lot of people just kind of forgot who Ritchie Valens was if it wasn't for that plane crash. I mean, like I brought up the Big Bopper. I mean, let's be real. If the Big Bopper, if it wasn't for that, would we really still be even talking about him that much? Probably not. He'd be
probably not.
Like you said, he was a novelty. He was a novelty.
The song's kind of a wedding novelty, not so much now, but it used to be. And you would hear it a lot.
Yeah, like that would have never stuck around. Nobody plays that anymore.
No.
But La Bamba's a little different.
His music's a little different. And people still cover his stuff.
Well, not just that. The guy had one album basically, and it just resonates. Yeah. And not just that, like Los Lobos did La Bamba in his image and had a #1 fucking hit with it.
Right. And that's the same thing with Buddy Holly. They both had musical descendants that are carrying their name still to this day. So
and I'll even argue that their version of Come On, Let's Go.
Ooh.
I like it a little bit better than Ritchie's.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ritchie. I love you, but
listen, at release time of this video is out, everyone that's watching it, Los Lobos has 2 new songs out, and they are so amazing. These guys are still amazing.
They kick it.
Jesus. All right, well, Tom.
We've gone on a lot longer than you wanted. You're gonna have to chop this down.
We're giving them a lot. We're giving the audience a lot. I want to thank again.
It's just
Tom.
This love for this movie, man, and I mean Lou Diamond Phillips. I mean, come on. I don't care what you say about him. It was because of this movie he's a star, and he's still beloved to this day.
Yep.
And I hope he never apologizes for his legacy. I'd hate to think that he would, because just the other day I saw that Fisher Stevens is apologizing for playing Ben in Short Circuit. Don't, man. Come on. I know
that's a whole other can of worms.
I know it's a whole nother can of worms, but I mean, yes, there's some stereotypes there, but stop it. You made that character a very lovable character. It's not like you're playing a bad guy.
Isai's not Mexican. He wasn't Chicano.
No, he's not. But even if
you could go down the list. But go ahead, you were saying?
No, Isai's not, but then the rest of the family for the most part is played by. But you're right. That's one thing that probably should be done right, is the family does need to be played by an actual Latino cast.
Listen. Lou should never apologize.
No, never apologize, Lou.
Never apologize, actors, first of all. And if they are going to remake, we've talked about this, there are some great choices for
absolutely
to play Ritchie. And it would be kind of interesting to see who can come up and play Bob. That would be awesome.
That's the one we've never really talked about, because I think that's even a tougher role to fill than Ritchie, to be honest.
That's a tougher role. I mean, the kid, he's not really a kid, but he's very striking looking. Raul Castillo. He's in Zack Snyder's new film, Army of the Dead. Or is that what it's called? Army of the Dead? The zombie film, the new one. And he was in a film called El Chicano. He's got the intensity and the look.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And he can act. That's the most important thing. So,
like, that's the thing is with Bob, it's a little harder than Ritchie, because there's not much footage of Ritchie out there. There's very, very little footage of Ritchie out there.
So then there's Bob, but then there's topping Isai.
That's just it. I was going to say, first of all, you have Bob, who there's tons and tons of interview footage out there of him. And Bob actually had him there on the set. And he did such a good job of just not imitating, but becoming Bob.
Yeah.
That, it's going to be tough for anybody to come in and do that. And you're not going to have the same, you'd almost have to get with his side just to have him to study with, because he's probably the person closest to Bob alive.
That'd be a great idea. That's a great idea, is that if they do produce, is like, to get these consultants of the actors that were in it before,
you almost have to.
Yeah. That's a great idea, especially for Bob. Because I'm trying to think, and now I'm trying to think of the other actors that I had in my top 10 list, because Raul was in it. I can't see anyone else tackling. No to Pedro, no to Xolo. Xolo's for Ritchie. Oscar Isaac. Oh God, Oscar Isaac as an actor can pull anything off.
He's almost too big for
Bob,
not just for Bob, just for the project in general. Because
you never know, man. You never know. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
He's almost like would take too much attention away from everybody else.
Ricardo's too old. The other ones are,
if Diego Luna could beef up a little bit, maybe, but because he
can play. Diego's got a hard accent.
That's the thing. But Bob does too in real life.
That's a Chicano American accent. Completely.
That's what I'm saying. Well, true.
Yeah, completely different.
But I trust an actor to be able to.
And Diego has gotten more chiseled and rough. You know what? He could do it.
He would really have to beef up, though. That's the problem.
In his role in Narcos, what a son of a bitch he is in that movie. In Narcos Mexico, oof. He's
But that's another thing, is like guys like Pedro and Diego are a little too big, because
they're also a little too. I mean,
age-wise, true.
Feather's too old, but Diego's pretty good. But I would
now you've sold me on a fucking sorry. Now you've sold me on a Bob series, and I almost want to see Asai come back as an older Bob. Damn it. Because he did do a lot of stuff later in his life. Like, I mean, because he was in prison for many years, and then
that's a beautiful story.
I know.
That's a beautiful story, because he died right too. Like he lived a great life. Oof.
Because you could have like a younger guy, like because he looks almost like him, like that guy you showed here, kind of, if you have to play like the middle years. But I mean, even if you don't, I mean, you could probably make Asai look a little younger if you had to. But I mean, he was already
East Side's aging really well.
That's what I'm saying. Like he was already old enough in the movie to where if you kind of just picked up like X amount of years later.
But Raul's is very charismatic. Which has to be. Bob has to be charismatic.
He even says it.
It's heavy.
I know. I mean, it really get, but to be able to have a guy like that, but that just with that machismo and that kind of just that hard edge, but then at the same time, that's why his side worked, because he has a softness to him and a vulnerability. And when you see Ritchie and him in those scenes, that's when you see Bob's vulnerabilities. And he is kind of a kid. He's just a lost kid who just wanted his dad to love him. You know, and he, like you said, I loved him. He treated me like a dog, and I still loved him. You know, when he talks about Steve, I was like, goddamn dog. I just, how did he not get nominated?
We love you, Eastside.
No shit, man. Like if there's one of my top ones ever, like if I had a top 5 list, it'd be like Jim Carrey, Man on the Moon, Asai Morales, and La Bamba. Like down the line, that would be it. Like right there, like guys who never got nominated for shit they should have.
For a great performance.
Oh God,
like not even nominated. I
mean, that movie and his performance really gets me fired up every time I see it. Like it can get you going. Like even just thinking about just the things that Bob's going through. And that's the thing, is you care about the guy, even though he's a complete fucking asshole.
Well, not a complete, but he is an asshole.
Oh, he's a complete asshole. Let's be real.
Yeah. Well,
he does atone for his sins later in life. That's the thing that makes his character even more now so, because we didn't know. Yeah. Now knowing his complete journey is even more heartbreaking. Because
and in the movie he sobers up and he's being present for his kid. What a great
that role. Didn't last long in real life, but it
oh, Bob. All right, Tom.
But he came back around. That's the point.
This was a great talk.
Like I said, this part can be cut out if you have to. But no, like you're right though. A Bob story is actually the more unexplored territory here.
Well, that would go good with a miniseries, because that's what Selena the miniseries did, is that they paid attention to the brother and sister and the dad who actually created and wrote a lot of Selena's music. Like it was a team family effort, her story. And of course her tragedy is one thing, but their rise, was definitely interesting, so yeah. Well, I want to thank Tom from Midnight's Edge for joining me. Thank you so much, brother.
Thanks for having me, man. I love talking this movie, so
yeah.
Thanks for thinking of me, and hopefully this brings some well-needed attention to this film.
Yeah, and thank you. I'm glad that major newspapers are still paying attention to these great films.
Yeah, if you get a chance, if you're anywhere near where this film is playing in theaters, I envy you. Go see it, man. Do yourself a favor.
All right, guys, we'll see you soon. Take it easy. Peace.
Come on, y'all. Come on, y'all. Come on, y'all. The Slant. Slant. All right, Paulie, let's go.